Okay, so we're going to get started. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Sharon Campo. I am a supervising attorney here at Legal Services of Long Island. I'm also with the Legal Support Center for Advocates. So thanks for signing up and joining us today for the basics of applying for SSI for children. We have with us supervising attorney Sarah Kupferberg, who will be reviewing everything with you today. So just as a reminder for some folks who don't know, I believe we probably have a lot of new people with us today. We just changed our name about 6 months ago from NASA Suffolk Law Services to Legal Services of Long Island. Same organization, pretty much same everything really, just a new name. So just keep that in mind when you hear, and that we have our new website, legalservicesli.org. So just a few housekeeping notes. Please make sure you keep your microphone muted so we don't have any background noise and we can hear Sarah as she goes throughout the presentation. I should have changed this, but today we're going to try something new. If you do have a question, please put it into the Q&A. You should see that on your Zoom tab. There should be something that says Q&A, and put any questions you have in there. We're going to try that out today, see how it works. So that way we can organize things a little bit better. So put the questions in there, and we will have some polls throughout the presentation. We have a survey at the end of the presentation, so if you can complete that, we'd really appreciate it. And I did send out slides this morning, so if you didn't receive them, you can email me scampo@legalservicesli.org, but I also will send them out again, most likely next week. So just a little bit about who we are, what we do. Legal Services of Long Island has been around since, let's see, I think 1966. Next year will be our 60th anniversary, very exciting. But we are the largest legal services provider on Long Island for free civil legal services. We handle over 6,000 cases every year, and that includes direct representation, phone consultations, brief service, referrals. We do have offices in Hempstead, Islandia, and Riverhead, and our case handling staff do include attorneys, paralegals, and social workers. We have different partnerships with community agencies, whether it's Empire Justice Center or Brighter Tomorrows. So we like to work with different agencies as well. And we have 3 different offices in Hempstead, in Islandia, and in Riverhead. And we ask that if you are going to be sending a client our way, or you yourself are a client, please call one of our offices, the one that's closest to you. So for example, Nassau County, if you're a Nassau County resident, you would be calling the Nassau County office in Hempstead. If you're the Suffolk County resident, you would be calling either the Islandia or Riverhead office. Typically, folks who are west of 112 call the Riverhead office. And we have about 20 different programs.
That's east of 112, Sharon. Excuse me.
Thank you. Sorry. East of 112, not west. So we have 20 different programs throughout the island. We have some variety of family court programs, whether it's a domestic violence project or a child support defense project. We have different disability and health related units. One of them Sarah supervises. Sarah supervises our disability advocacy project. We have our mental health, education and disability rights. And then in about a week and a half, we'll be talking about ICANN, which helps with managed long-term care issues. So a variety of disability and health related units. Some of our bigger units are the civil unit, which assists with eviction prevention, or our foreclosure defense project. And then we also have other units that specialize in areas of law or in a specific population, whether it's our Veterans Rights Project, our Adult Care Facility Unit, or Consumer Debt. I do supervise our Consumer Debt Unit here in Suffolk County. But any description of our units are on our website, so feel free to take a look if you would like to know more about what each of those units does. And then just a little bit about our Legal Support Center for Advocates. This is a program specifically for advocates, and the definition of advocate would be, for example, someone who works for a nonprofit, who is a social worker, or a caseworker, or an attorney who works for legal aid, or a private practice attorney, or a staff member at an elected official's office or a government agency, a church volunteer who's assisting, persons and has a question. So the Legal Support Center for Advocate is not for clients, it is for advocates. And they can call us if they have a question about whether or not it's a legal issue we would handle, if we have a unit for that, or let's say they just have a question in general. We'll try to either get them an answer, or we'll get them a referral, or we'll see if it's something that we can handle internally. We also host these community trainings. We publish newsletters. Hopefully, we'll be getting you a new newsletter this week or the next 2 weeks. That is our goal. So we have our email advocacy tips that we send out. So a lot of different great things that we have for our advocates. Okay, so just a quick poll. First, what type of advocate are you, and have you ever called LSCA? So I'm going to bring up the polls. And first is, what type of advocate are you? So if you could just take a moment to take the poll, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results, see who we have with us here today. So it looks like we have a large amount of nonprofit employees, attorneys, and social workers. So thanks for joining us today. And then next is, have you ever called the Legal Support Center for Advocates? So if you could just take a moment to answer that. Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, and I'm going to share the results. So it looks like we have a lot of people who are unfamiliar with our program for advocates, so welcome. And we have a bunch of people who are familiar, and then we have a few who have Kathy on speed dial. So happy to welcome you, and hopefully you're able to call our service. Okay. All right, so definitely check out our website, learn about our program, sign up for our legal lessons, come to our trainings. We have a lot of self-help resources on there, and the other events that we are hosting are on our website as well. And like I said, we have an upcoming presentation on April 9th to talk about our unit ICANN and community-based managed long-term care. So definitely register or share the word. We'd appreciate it. And just a quick note, all the information that we share with you today is legal information. It is not legal advice. Legal advice depends upon the specific facts of each situation, and the materials that we provide with you today cannot replace the advice of competent legal counsel. And of course, we always make every effort to keep our materials up to date as well. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Sarah.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So children can be eligible for a variety of benefits under the Social Security Administration programs. That can include survivor's benefits if they have a deceased parent or guardian, dependent benefits if one of their parents or guardians is on Social Security themselves, supplemental security income, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then there's also something called disabled adult child benefits, which is for adults who became disabled at a young age and can collect under their parents. So we're not going to talk about all of those today. If you have anything that you specifically want future presentations on, please let us know and we'll try to, get those set up. But this is going to talk about supplemental security income. So next. So supplemental security income for children is generally a program that's for lower income families that have a child that's disabled. Because it's for lower income families, there are eligibility criteria that have financial eligibility requirements. And there are also medical criteria to determine whether or not the client meets the child meets the medical definition of disability under the Social Security regulations. So today I'm going to go over those eligibility criteria. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the application process and how you can apply for benefits. And then we're going to discuss the appeal process. I'm going to try to leave time between each section to address any questions that might come in. And if I go too fast or I use an acronym that you don't understand, please try to put that in the Q&A as well so that I can try to address any confusion. Next. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the financial eligibility. So for SSI, for children, there are both income and asset limits. The income limits do address both income to the child and income from the parents or guardians. Income to the child can be, if you have a teenager, they may be working, and that work income is going to affect potentially their eligibility criteria. Additionally, income to the children might include child support. If there's more than one child in a household, there are ways that the administration proportions the child support to determine whether that disabled child is still financially eligible for benefits. The income limit also includes deemed income from the parents or guardians, and that can also be earned or unearned income. And then the asset limits is generally a $2,000 asset limit for the child, and it can also include deemed assets from income from the guardians as well. So we'll discuss that a little bit further in the next slide. So as an example, this is a deemed income chart from 2025. So basically what it shows is a couple of things. The first is that Social Security does prefer or does have more favorable rules for people with earned income as opposed to unearned income. Earned income is income that you receive either from work or self-employment when you provide a service and receive a benefit or receive income. Unearned income is basically everything else. So that's income from other public benefits, if parents are on Social Security themselves, or even like rental income, any income that's not related to work generally. So as you can see, depending on the size of the household and the type of income earned, the eligibility will either be reduced for the amount of benefits that a child can receive in SSI, or it can actually be ceased. The child can be ineligible. What I would generally suggest, because as you can tell from this chart, it is complicated. It can get more complicated if there's both earned and unearned income in the family. So what I would generally suggest is just if there's a lower income family, apply for the benefit if the child you think is disabled. If Social Security finds that the person is not eligible because of an income issue, they will send out a notice and they will tell you why they find that you're not eligible. And if that's the case, then you at least have the breakdown. And if the breakdown is incorrect, you can appeal that. So I just wanted to give an overview. It's very complicated. If you have specific questions, you can reach out to LSCA, but just as an idea of how that deeming might work from the parents or guardian to the child. Next. So there is also asset deeming from the parent or guardian to the child. So if a child lives in a one-parent home, the first $2,000 of the parent's assets are excluded and will not be countable. But anything above that would then go towards that child $2,000 limit. So if one parent household has more than $4,000 in assets generally, that's going to make that child ineligible. And then in a two-parent home, the parent's asset disregard is $3,000. Some assets are also disregarded. So things like if you own the home you live in, that would not be counted as an asset. And also your first family car. So if you own one car as a family, that car is not going to be counted as an asset. But again, everything else really is. So SSI generally tends to be for families that have lower incomes and lower assets. Next. Oh, actually, yeah, I'm going to have questions at this point. Does anyone have any questions about the income or?
We do have a question in the Q&A, so thank you for using that. So this says, my son was getting benefits when he was younger, but once I started making too much money working, he was cut off. Now that he is 18, can I apply for him directly and they won't take my income into play?
Yeah, so he would, as someone who's over 18, would have to be the one applying, but you could certainly help him with that application process. Since he is a legal adult, he would have to sign all the paperwork and agree for that application. But at 18, his earnings and his income, his earnings, and also his assets would be what matters. It wouldn't be the family anymore.
Thank you. And 3,000 assets, is that per month?
So income is what you get monthly, and assets is money that you have either in the bank or other fungible or non-fungible. So either money that's accessible or not. So 3,000 is what they're going to look at each month. If you have 1 month that you're over the $3,000 asset, but you spend down the bank account to under that, then they could be eligible the next month. But it's not income when we're talking about assets. They are two separate things.
Okay. So back to the 18-year-old, doesn't matter that he's still in school.
So what I'm going to say is questions that are really specific. I don't want to give legal advice over this training. I would prefer to keep that to calls. So if you want to maybe reach out later, we could try to talk about specifically your son's situation. But even if someone's in school, they can still apply under adult SSI.
Yeah. So if anyone has any like super personal questions, you can always email me and then I will forward it to Sarah. Okay, so do assets include retirement accounts?
So assets do include retirement accounts, anything that can be accessed even if there is a penalty. It can also include some types of life insurance policies that have that you can access for at that time. So if you have a life insurance policy that is accessible during your lifetime, that is also an asset. There are some ways to like try to shield children's assets using ABLE accounts and things like that, but that's not really going to be today's program. That being said, it is a low asset amount. It has not changed in a very long time. And so it will exclude a lot of families. And we do understand that. But unfortunately, that is currently what the law says.
Okay. Okay. Is there any, so if a child who's over 18 is living in the parent's house, does it matter, would they look at the parent's income because it lives in the same household or supported by them?
So they should not look at the parent's income. It could affect the eligibility or how much money the child gets in benefits as an adult SSI beneficiary, but they should still be able to put in an application and receive benefits. That being said, if the parents actually give that child a monthly income, like you give your child $600 per month, that could affect them in that it would be unearned income. So just living with someone who has money and pays household bills is not going to make an 18-year-old ineligible for benefits. It might reduce their benefit level, but actually giving an 18-year-old money could risk their eligibility depending on the amount of income they were getting.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on.
Yeah. And thank you for all your questions. Okay, so now I'm going to just go over the disability criteria for SSI for children. So generally speaking, there's three criteria. So the first is that the child cannot be working over the level of substantial gainful activity. Of course, with young children, this isn't going to come up, but with high school age children that may work, it could. SGA is a specific amount, and it is increased every year. So for example, in 2025, SGA for people who are not blind is $1,620 per month. But if an individual is blind, they do have a higher SGA level, and that is $2,700 per month. This is not to determine their financial eligibility. This is a disability criteria eligibility issue. So if you are able to maintain employment, the Social Security Administration is going to say that that alone makes you not disabled. But if you are under that amount, it could still affect your financial eligibility, but it would not affect your disability eligibility in the same way. I know that's a little complicated. But it is two separate things. The next question is whether or not the impairment causes marked or severe functional limitations. And the third is whether or not the impairment has lasted or can be expected to last for 12 months or result in death. And that's called the duration requirement. What I want you to understand from this slide specifically is that a diagnosis is not a disability. Social Security is looking at this in the functional limitations of the impairment, whether it's a physical, intellectual, or mental impairment. That impairment will have functional limitations, and that is what the Social Security Administration is looking for. Okay, next. So one way to be found disabled is that Social Security does publish a list of impairments and criteria that would automatically show disability if they're met. This list is organized by affected body systems. So there will be like a pulmonary or lungs section. There will be a neurological or brain section. And so there are a bunch of different listings. You can find them online. You can look them over. You could also have the child's doctor look over the listings for the affected body part and see if the doctor feels that they could maybe write something that would reflect that the child meets the listing by pointing to specific areas in their medical records and testing and limitations. But again, these are going to be like the most severe impairments. So for example, someone with asthma, a child with asthma that's trying to be found disabled would have to, under the listings, show that they had 3 hospitalizations as a result of that asthma within a 12-month period, and each hospitalization has to be at least 30 days apart. So the listings cover all sorts of different criteria, and they may or may not be met. Even if you don't meet a listing, though, you can still find that a child is, or Social Security can still find that a child is disabled. So we'll go to the next slide. And that is by finding functional equivalence. So if the listings aren't met, the child applicant has to show 2 marked or 1 extreme limitations in the functional domains. A marked limitation is generally a limitation that interferes seriously with your ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities. And Social Security generally finds that an equivalent of 2 standard deviations from the mean would be what is expected from a marked impairment. So for example, for an intellectual limitation, an IQ of 70 would generally be 2 standard deviations from the mean. So that would be marked. An extreme limitation interferes very seriously with an ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities, and that's the equivalent to at least 3 standard deviations below the mean. So the reason these functional limitations are important is because when Social Security evaluates a child, they look at the whole child, meaning they look at what activities the child can and cannot do despite or because of their limitations, including what supports are needed to do those activities. And then they look at how the impairments affect each domain individually. And children are then compared to the expected ability of an average child of the same age that has no limitations. So next. So the domains where they can find the functional limitations, and remember, again, it's 2 marked and one extreme. So 2 marked or 1 extreme limitation in acquiring or using information, which is generally a child's ability to learn and think about information and use information. The second is attending and completing tasks, which is a child's ability to focus, maintain attention, complete tasks without getting too distracted. The third is interacting or relating with others, which is a child's ability to initiate and respond to exchanges with other people and to form and sustain relationships. The fourth is moving about and manipulating objects. So that's a child's ability to move themselves through space and also their ability to move other things through space. So opening doors, lifting objects, carrying objects, and also their ability to walk, stand, roll, all of those good things. They also look at a child's ability to care for themselves, which would be the ability to maintain a healthy emotional and physical state. And then the health and physical well-being is a little bit different, but they do look at the cumulative effects of the physical or mental limitations and the treatments on the child's functioning. So yeah, so at this point, are there any questions on what makes a child medically eligible for Social Security benefits?
Okay, so there were some, at least one question. Does the cancer diagnosis or treatment qualify a child for disability?
So the answer is always going to be, we probably need more information. I'm not asking you to provide it, but to determine whether a child meets one of these listings, again, they're looking at symptoms, not diagnoses. So different types of cancers, different types of treatments will result in different limitations to the child. There are certainly listings on malignant neoplasms, which is cancer, and certain types of cancer will meet those listings if it's severe enough. If it is not severe enough, then they're still going to go back to those functional limitations in the domains. So, you know, if the child does have limitations in moving about and manipulating objects, caring for themselves, maintaining health and physical well-being, even, you know, acquiring information or completing tasks because of the symptoms of either the cancer or the cancer treatment, then they could meet the disability of definition of disability. But it's really a case-by-case evaluation. And it's the important thing to note for Social Security is the limitations that the diagnosis creates, not the diagnosis itself.
Okay, thank you. This is just a general question. Can the application be printed or do you have to go to an office?
Well, that is a great segue for our next section, which is how to submit an application.
Awesome. So before we get there, we did have another question. What testing from the school or medical profession is usually used aside from IQ?
So I will go into that, I think, a little bit more in how to submit an application again. So I'll try, if I don't address the actual testing that you're looking for, ask that question again, or like, I don't know, to give a little shout out, and I will try to address that in the next section.
Okay, great.
Okay, so the first thing before you submit the application, you should prepare the documents, because the more complete your application is at the initial submission, the more likely you are to be able to get a favorable decision at an earlier time frame. So what we would always suggest is request and compile all of the medical records from the child's doctors. You could fill out the HIPAA form, which is available, which I noted. There is also a new reproductive health attestation, which is available online. Basically, this is for the person filling out the request for records, and it's just an attestation saying that the information that we receive isn't going to affect or isn't going to be used to punish anyone for their reproductive health decisions. Generally, that has been required by doctors regardless of the gender of the applicant. And So I don't know, your mileage may vary, but it's probably a good idea to just have it filled out and then submitted with the HIPAA. You're also going to request and compile school records. This can include IEPs, discipline records, and attendance records. And you're going to want to complete testing. So the testing used is going to depend on the actual medical diagnosis. So for a cognitive impairment, there might be IQ testing or testing on educational achievement. There can also be testing on executive functioning or other neuropsychological testing. But for other impairments, you might need imaging scans. There's MRIs or CTs if you're having an orthopedic issue. If you have some kind of blood condition, then the blood testing is going to be really important. So the testing is going to be specific to the diagnosis that you have. So I would definitely discuss that with the doctors, the teachers, and whatever other professionals you deal with your child to see what kind of testing might be appropriate to show the limitations that the child has. You should also, if possible, request letters from the doctors and teachers which discuss how the impairments affect the specific functional domains. So there is a teacher questionnaire specifically. If you get a letter from a doctor, a lot of doctors unfortunately feel like if they just put a diagnosis and that they've treated the person for a specific length of time and this is the medication, that's enough. But if you have a good relationship with your child's doctors, really see if you can push the doctor to get more information in those letters about how the child's diagnoses actually lead to functional impairments. How does it affect the child's ability to acquire and use information? How does it affect the child's ability to complete their tasks? All of those things are going to lead to a much stronger application. Next. So once you've gathered all of your information, you're going to want to submit the application. You can do that online. Social Security used to not allow SSI applications online, but they have actually created an online SSI application. You could also set up an appointment to apply by phone or in person. I've listed all of the local Social Security offices where you might want to do that. If you're not sure which office you should contact, you can look it up it's like locate my field office at ssa.gov, and they'll tell you which office to go to. But what I do want to let you know is very recently, Social Security submitted an emergency message that basically says that they're discouraging walk-ins. And so they really want people to request appointments by phone. If you show up without an appointment to a Social Security office, they are supposed to try to see you. But I do think depending on the office, you'll have more or less success. So I would say don't show up in person unless you really have to. Definitely try to make an online appointment or an appointment, either by phone or in person to fill out and submit the documents. You could also, if you wanted to, fill out the forms yourself and mail them or fax them to the Social Security office. These are the forms that are required, the 3820 BK, the 8000 BK, and the 827. And you can submit those, or you can find them online, print them, fill them out, and submit them. What I would caution is that you want a receipt of submitting anything to the Social Security Administration. So if you fax them, definitely keep that fax cover sheet as proof that you submitted the applications. SSI is only payable from the month after the month you apply. So if for some reason they lose your documentation, you want to show that you have already applied and that you should get paid from the month that you actually submitted the first application. If you mail forms, I would say return receipt requested or some kind of tracking, just again to show that you've really submitted the documentation if there's ever a question. Next. Oh, sorry. And one other thing for both the HIPAAs and the forms you're going to fill out for Social Security, depending on the child's age, the child may actually have to co-sign some of those forms. I believe the age is 12, but I have to recheck. But I believe that after 12, the child actually does also have a right to their own privacy for HIPAA and also for Social Security forms. So have the child sign as well if they're over that age. So identity verification. So this is actually kind of something that's currently evolving. On April 18th, the Social Security Administration announced that they had new identity verification procedures. They originally said that they were going to be put in place on March 31st. They did move it 2 weeks to April 14th. And originally they said that applicants would have to verify their identification or their identity via digital identity proofing or in-person identity verification. They have since walked this back a little bit. And so they're saying that you do not have to verify your identity just to put in an application, but to change certain data after you put in the application, like payment information, you will still have to do this. So if you are not able to use a My SSA account, you would have to go in person. Again, make an appointment using the phone, call up, and then go in person. Once again, they did change it. You don't have to do this to put in your application, only to change information after, such as changing direct deposit information. You can also read the press release online in case you're a little confused. And Social Security has been releasing basically daily press releases. So if that's something you're interested in keeping up to date with, you could definitely visit ssa.gov and check out their press releases on all sorts of issues. So does anyone have questions on submission of an application?
Okay, so let me see here. So I don't know if you may have reviewed this, but how do I submit an application if I make an appointment over the phone?
Yeah, so they'll take your information from you and they're going to build the application themselves. And then they will probably just ask for a signature verification once they collect all the information. So everything will be put in. Social Security will ask all the questions necessary to complete the forms. They will complete the forms on your behalf, and then you'll have to sign them.
Okay. If a child cannot sign because of lack of capacity, do parents have to take out a guardianship on the child?
I mean, parents already have guardianship, so I mean, Social Security should, I think, understand that specific situation. If you're having issues with that, I would definitely either give us a call or contact your congressperson, because that is something that, yeah, shouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Just a reminder to everyone, if you could put any questions into the Q&A instead of the chat. If you look at your Zoom, if you don't see the Q&A, there should be 3 dots, and you can click on the 3 dots, and then Q&A is there. So just keep that in mind. About how long, or is there an average to get a determination or to have the application processed?
So all times are, I would say, variable. Usually, I would say for an initial application, it'll take somewhere between 3 and 9 months. But it also depends on how backlogged the Social Security Administration is. So anything I say now could definitely change depending on the staffing at the agency.
And this is kind of going back to eligibility, but if parents are divorced, are both parents' incomes considered for eligibility?
So yes, but it would, I believe they would look at it household by household. So if they're eligible in one household, but not eligible in the other, like under the other, they would not be eligible. But if they're eligible separately in both individual households, I believe that should be fine.
Okay. All right. Okay, so this one says, can you discuss what the steps are for parents of children who are already receiving Social Security and are turning 18?
So I think that would be a whole nother program or a whole other presentation. There are some things that you can do to set your child up for success. So the first thing is at 18 Social Security or 19, Social Security is going to do a age 18 review. And so definitely maintaining the treatment because they're going to determine whether the child is then eligible under the adult guidelines. So that's the first thing to keep them in a continued eligibility status would be get all the medical records you can at that time. Make sure you're doing all the appointments because there will be an age 18 review. There always is. The other thing is if an individual is not going to be eligible under the adult criteria, you're pretty sure about that, or you're not sure if they will be eligible under the adult criteria, you might want to start setting up a vocational training program with Access VR, because if they have an educational or vocational training program through Access VR, you can maintain their benefits even if they don't meet the disability criteria exactly during the time where they're like progressing towards independence. But again, that's going to be that would be a completely separate training. So if you have any questions, I'd say email us after and I'll try to provide you the information on that type of benefit. I think it's like section 301 benefits.
Okay, let me see. Do you have to submit an application every year?
No. So Social Security, you need to submit one application in order to be evaluated. If the child is found to be disabled, then you do not have to resubmit an application. There are continuing disability reviews though, and Social Security will initiate those on their own. So it is important to maintain treatment and maintain the medical records and the child's ongoing supports to have those documented, because if there is a continuing disability review, which Social Security will let you know, then they are going to reevaluate the medical records to see if the child has improved from their prior baseline, and if they have improved, whether they remain disabled. Social Security will also do financial eligibility checks. They do sometimes do those yearly, but again, that's all going to be initiated by Social Security. So once a child is on benefits, you do not have to reapply. If the child is denied benefits, we're going to talk about that in the next section.
Okay. So I'm not sure if you could comment on this, Sarah, but this question is, I'm looking at the teacher questionnaire and I'm wondering why more of this language isn't used in the present levels on an IEP. Should I advocate to have this language of the questionnaire aligned to an IEP?
So I don't know. I think generally speaking, the IEP is trying to do something slightly different than what Social Security is trying to get to. I would say that if you can get the language in the IEP, that could be very helpful. I also think one of the important things to note is that IEPs are often very encouraging for what the child can do. I would try to make sure that both the child's strengths as well as their struggles are reflected on the IEP if you plan on applying for Social Security benefits.
Okay, great, thanks. All right.
And I think we shared the slides. So again, if you didn't receive them, let Sharon know.
Yeah, I did share them before the presentation, and I put my email in the chat so that folks, if you didn't get it, you can email me, but I will also be sending them out again next week.
Okay, so for the initial application, so this next section is just going to go through the actual evaluation process. So the case is going to get assigned to an analyst once you submit all your documentation, and the analyst may request new or updated records or forms. The analyst is going to be located at the OTDA, and they're actually a contractor with Social Security. So they're not a Social Security employee, but they are contracted by Social Security to make decisions in line with the Social Security regulations. The child also might be sent to a consultative examination with a doctor. That doctor will be paid by Social Security. If you go to a consultative examination, they do have the applicant or the parent fill out paperwork at that before they actually meet with the doctor. Make sure that paperwork is really well filled out, really specific, because I do feel the doctors use that paperwork a lot when making their opinions. And show up to any Social Security appointments how the child shows up in their daily life. If a child needs an assistive device that they use daily, definitely bring that to the consultative examination. On the other end, if a child is not noted to need a mobility device, don't bring a mobility aid. You know, you want the child to really be presenting how they present on an average day. And then as I said, the initial decision usually comes within 3 to 9 months. I would say usually on the longer end of that, usually 6 to 9, but some decisions can come quicker if they are, you know, either honestly on both ends of the spectrum, really strong cases, and then also cases that have very few records to review. If there's a reason that you need a decision quicker, like the family is in a financially dire situation, there's an eviction notice or other really impending issues, or the child has an impairment that is unfortunately likely to be to end in death, then you can also request that cases be expedited. So for the first issue, if the family has an eviction proceeding or there's other financial constraints, you can ask for there to be a dire need situation. If the child's condition is something that could end in death, then there may be a compassionate allowance request that you could put in to get the decision more quickly. Next. So if you get a denial on that initial application, there is an appeal process, and I would strongly advise you to follow the appeal process. You have to go in order. You cannot skip levels. But the first level is reconsideration. There's then an administrative law judge hearing, appeals council, and federal court. So we're going to go through each of those on their own. So next slide. As an overview, this is not the most up-to-date waterfall chart, but they do not change that much year to year. So this is the waterfall chart that Social Security publishes that shows the number of allowances and denials as a percentage at each level of the process. Now, again, this is not specific to child's cases, but they will be similar. I know this chart can be discouraging, but I really share it as an encouragement. So if you look, the denial rate at the initial level is 61%. That means most people get denied. If your child gets denied or the child you're advocating for gets denied, you're in good company. That doesn't mean you should not try to appeal. In fact, you definitely should appeal. Unfortunately, the reconsideration level you can see also doesn't have a very high allowance rate, but at the administrative law judge hearing, if you look, it's now broken into 3. And those dismissals, that 24% of cases, is cases that the person didn't show up to the hearing. So if you're only looking at the cases that show up to the hearing, they actually do have a pretty high level of success rate. So I know this is a little bit of a discouraging chart, but I do share it to encourage you to continue the appeal process because people do get results farther down the appeal levels. So next. Okay, so if you're denied at the initial application, you have to request a reconsideration, and that has to be done within 60 days of the denial. You also get 5 days for mailing, so it's usually like 65 days from the date on the letter. But if you remember 60 days, you'll never be late. You have to obtain and submit the updated medical records from the time period between the initial application and the current reconsideration request. You can request that appeal online. If for some reason you miss the 60-day window to appeal, You can still submit an appeal, but you do have to say a good cause reason you missed it. So if you didn't get the notice, or you moved and your address changed, or I don't know, there was some kind of medical issue in the family, and so the parent wasn't able to appeal in time, you can still appeal after those 60 days, but you do need a good reason that you missed the deadline. You could also, instead of appealing online, you could call the local Social Security office to make an appointment. At the reconsideration level, a new analyst is going to be assigned to review the complete file and make a new decision. This does usually take another 3 to 9 months. And if you remember from the waterfall chart, this is also not the most helpful level. So don't be surprised if you were denied the initial application and you're denied the reconsideration. I would definitely suggest you go to the next step. And Sharon? Okay, so the administrative law judge level, it's always good to be represented even at the initial or reconsideration levels. But if you have the ability to have a legal representative at the administrative law level, I do think it makes a big difference. If you qualify for our services, you can call and see if you qualify. Otherwise, you could look at private counsel. But the ALJ level is no longer a paper review. There is actually a hearing where witnesses are called and testimony is taken. You would also have to request an ALJ hearing within 60 days of the reconsideration denial. You can appeal online. Again, going to sound like a broken record, but the most important part of a Social Security case is the medical records. So request, submit updated medical records. It's going to take a little bit of time before the hearing is scheduled, usually 6 to 8 months. And then once a hearing is scheduled, usually the hearing is scheduled around 3 months from the notice of the hearing. The hearings are done in a variety of ways via telephone, Microsoft Teams, or in person. Social Security does send out the forms to see what type of hearing you would like. If you would not like a telephone hearing or an in-person hearing with a non-in-person judge, I know that shouldn't be an option, but it is. You actually have to say no to those. So you have to reject those, and they'll send it in the form. If you want a Microsoft Teams hearing, you have to actually affirmatively say that you want the video hearing. If you do nothing, your hearing will likely be scheduled by telephone. If you reject a telephone hearing and a in-person hearing with a non-in-person judge, which is called I don't know. They changed the name of it, but it used to be a video teleconference hearing. If you reject those but do not accept the Microsoft Teams hearing, then you will get an in-person hearing with an in-person judge. If that was too complicated, let me know and I'll try to say it again. And for a children's hearing, the judge is going to want to speak to both the child and the parent. You can also call other witnesses. So if there's like a care coordinator, a case manager, or a teacher that wants to testify, they can. Generally speaking, especially for older children, the judge is going to want the child and the parent to testify separately so that their testimony doesn't affect each other. And also, so if the parent has to say things that are hard to hear, the child isn't adversely affected by that emotionally. Next. So the appeals council, I don't have too much time, so I'm going to kind of rush through, but again, 60 days to submit an appeal. You can do it online. The appeals council is only going to review to determine if the ALJ followed the rules. They're not there to make a decision on if the judge made the wrong decision, only on if he followed the rules in making the decision. So at this point, you have to decide whether you want to appeal or reapply for benefits. You can't do both. And so it might be important to consult an attorney to review the decision to see if there are legal errors that could be the basis of the appeal. Because if you submit at the appeals council level without good legal basis, then you might just be holding yourself up from being able to reapply with new, better medical records. And it does take about a year to get a decision at the appeals council level. And then the final, the final appeal option is to go to federal court. You cannot go to federal court until you've done all of the other administrative appeals. But if you have and you get an unfavorable decision, you can, within 60 days of the AC denial, request a federal court review. Again, they're reviewing for legal error. And you can, at this point, submit a federal court complaint and reapply for benefits at the same time. So you can do both. It's not an either or at the federal court level. If you are not represented, then I would suggest you contact the pro se office at the federal courthouse. This is the number for the one in Central Islip. But yeah, again, would highly suggest trying to find representation if possible. And that's it. We have a couple minutes for questions. Does anyone have anything?
So Sarah, before we get into further questions, would you just quickly review what the Disability Advocacy Project does and how people can be potentially eligible?
Yeah, so our program, we assist people with denials from initial applications. So we don't help with the initial application. You'd have to file that alone. But if you do get a denial, you might be eligible for our services. We generally prioritize families that are on public assistance, and our clients generally have to be Medicaid, on Medicaid or Medicaid eligible. But yeah, so if a family's on public assistance, that's prioritized depending on our capacity. But we do advice and counsels for other issues, discontinuations, overpayments, things like that. And we do direct representation at the administrative law judge level, the appeals council, and federal court, and the reconsideration stage as well.
Thank you. Did we answer the question, what testing from the school or medical profession is usually used aside from IQ?
Yeah, I think that I answered it to the best of my ability, not knowing the impairment that's being alleged. So each impairment is going to have different testing that's required. If you have an issue with your lungs, they're going to need pulmonary function testing. If there's a musculoskeletal issue, they will probably need some kind of X-rays or MRIs or CT scans to show what kind of abnormalities there are with the musculoskeletal system. For IQ or intellectual limitation cases, then you won't, you'll obviously want the IQ testing. You probably also want the adaptive functioning testing, as well as educational achievement testing. And the adaptive functioning, the ABAS or the Vineland, I think it is, you could probably also want those for any kind of neurological condition as well. And also the academic achievement testing for any kind of neurological condition, including ADHD or some kind of other condition that could cause kind of a difficulty acquiring information.
Thank you. Okay, great. So it's 2 o'clock. Sarah, can you stay on a little longer to answer the rest of the question? That's okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are the decisions on the reconsiderations or appeals reported somewhere?
No. So for children, so for everyone, Social Security decisions are not searchable. So nothing that you submit to Social Security is going to be able to be found by anyone else. Only your attorney and the judge and whatever experts are on the case will have access to that, the adjudicators. At the federal court level, so if you decide to appeal to federal court, adults cases are searchable. Adults usually have their names associated with the cases, so someone might be able to find that information. But for children, what they do is they only use the child's initial in the court filing, so hopefully it would remain anonymous.
Okay, great. Is there a way to change your address if you're moved and you're still in the process?
Yes, you can contact your Social Security office. They, I believe, are requesting that changes of address be put in by in writing. So I would send a letter or a fax to my field office and then also follow up. If the case is already at the hearing level, then I would contact the Office of Hearing Operations. The number for the Office of Hearing Operations, if your case is at the hearing level, should be on the top left form of any letter that is sent to you.
Okay, great. What is the income bracket for parents in New York?
So unfortunately, this is a federal benefit, so everything is federal, the same across the board. So there is no cost of living change depending on where you are in the country. So it will be the same in New York as it is everywhere else.
Okay, do assets include 529s?
I believe they do.
Okay.
But I honestly, that I would have to look up. So if you want to take that person's information down, I will give a.
Okay, so whoever answered that question, if you would like Sarah to look that up, then please email me and I'll get that to Sarah. Okay, it looks like we don't have any other questions. But if you do have a question that pops up after this presentation, feel free to email me and I'll pass it along to Sarah. And thanks so much for joining us. If you have, like I said, if you are a client or you're an advocate with a client and you want them to be screened for eligibility, feel free to give us a call, check out our website, and come to our other presentations. So happy Friday and have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.